Hello, and welcome to this episode of The Inner Estate with your host, Bridget Stuart. Our guest today is Kerrie Droban Zhivago. Kerrie, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure.
Well, I'm really thrilled to have you as a guest on The Inner Estate because you have really done a lot within your career, but also in addition to your career on paper. And I want to dive into that. So you are not only an attorney with your own practice, but you are also a published author.
Yes.
And you're also a journalist.
Yes.
So I would love, tell us more. Tell us what you're passionate about right now in any of those areas that you're currently working.
Sure. I know it sounds sort of schizophrenic, right? I mean, like I have so many different hats that I wear, but they actually do marry together very well. So
Yes.
Journalist career really sort of dovetails nicely into my true crime writing career. So I'm a published author of 10 books, true crime books. My latest of which is something that was born out of a passion for what I do as a family law lawyer. So the latest book is Surviving a Psychopath.
Yes.
It's all the themes sort of married together, culminating in one spot. And I wrote the book because not only of my own personal experiences dealing with clients like that, but also my own marriages and divorces. But I thought, there's really a way to navigate these very high conflict, toxic divorces, relationships that a lot of people really don't know about. And so
Right.
I really just kind of took my own experiences and knowledge of that entire pathology and put it together in a book that I thought I was starting out to write as a guide. That's what I thought. I'm just going to write like a 20-page pamphlet that I can hand out to
Right.
clients. And then it sort of evolved into this really, I really got into the subject and just was so fascinated that it really became a book. And so that's, I guess, where my passion lies, where my heart lies now is really trying to understand not only the pathology of these dangerous people, but also what drives, the victims of or the prey. Because wherever you have a predator, you have a prey.
You have
And
prey.
so I was really fascinated by both scenarios. And so that's kind of where my interests lie right now.
It's really, and I believe there's even a subtitle to the book, right? Isn't it Surviving a Psychopath in Life and in Love? Yeah, I'll let you say it.
In court, in life, and in love.
There you go. In court, in life, and in love. Yes.
Yes.
I can't wait to check that out myself as someone who also has an S after marriages and divorces. I am curious to check that out. It's funny, so you started writing this and you mentioned your law practice, Zhivago Law, is a family. That's your area of expertise, is in family law, correct?
Yes. It stemmed from criminal. So I had a background in criminal law, which is where I sort of got my feet wet. I was a former prosecutor, former capital lawyer, and just when I segued a little bit out of that, I landed in family law. And I really landed in family law because one of my criminal clients wanted to get divorced. So
There you go.
yeah, so I thought, wow, this is a great segue into another area of law that really does have a lot of commonality to criminal law.
And I'm assuming, so when did all of that happen? Like, how long have you been focusing on the family law?
So family law has been about 15 years and criminal is about 30. So yeah,
All right.
all told, half and half.
Okay, that's really good. And so you're working in family law where I don't even really want to think about it. I'm sure you just see everything and anything. Like, talk about, I'm sure it's very broad, the things that you experience in family law. You felt compelled to, in this latest book, to focus on the people that are getting out of relationships with psychopaths.
Yes.
And how they can survive and thrive. And the reality is, correct me anywhere I'm wrong, is that sometimes it cannot be a complete break. When there's children or there's some other extenuating circumstance that cannot be resolved quickly, they may be out of the relationship, yet still have exposure, communication, and interaction with the person.
Yes.
So does your book go into that as well?
Yes, it covers the gamut. I would say because I used to tell my clients, and now it's really is more true than not, that you're never really divorced, which is as a divorcee, I know that. But there are techniques and there are ways and patterns of behavior that the former victim, now survivor, hopefully thriver, can implement in their life to have a life after. And that is really where a lot of the focus is. So I tell
Okay.
the scary stories that, and a lot of my clients, frankly, have experienced them. And I've had a lot of very serious, severe cases where
Right. I'm sure you have.
I've had the ex really a diagnosed bona fide psychopath. And I
Mhm.
know, people bandy the terms sociopath, psychopath around, but there really is what I'm talking about really more than that is behaviors, patterns of behavior that can be identified and that can be strategically litigated in order to extricate yourself out of that situation so that you're not constantly beholden to them. Now, it does get very complicated when children are involved, and I do cover
Yes.
that. I cover how not only how to have an exit strat, but also how do you protect the children. And so one of the things that really sort of fueled a lot of my writing of this book and this subject area is that there isn't any vehicle in the law that really helps survivors navigate psychological abuse because it truly is a crime without a crime scene. And
Yep.
it's a crime that keeps going. And what I always impress upon or try to impress upon courts and the survivors of is that the reason you have to learn how to navigate this is because not only is it dangerous while you're going through it, but more often than not, unfortunately, it leads to the physical. So it turns from psychological to the physical.
To physical.
And it's really like, I hate to use this phrase, but we've all seen it in the media. It's like murder in slow motion.
Yes.
And so that's why I'm so passionate about it. But in the court system, and to your question, how do they navigate out of it? How do they navigate through it, first of all, to explain or educate to a court that we have to change the narrative? Because what happens is the predator really gets his theater. He gets his stage. And the courtroom is his stage. And so he manipulates his lawyers, the judges, the counselors, the experts. So this goes on and it re-traumatizes the victims. And so what I always encourage victims to do is to say, you can control the story, you can control the narrative here. And the idea is to change that for the judge, that you're now in protection mode with your children.
Right.
You're not in a co-parenting mode. You're not trying to because what and your listeners have probably seen this a lot too, is that what happens more often than not is the victims are often in this position where they're reacting to these outrageous behaviors, right?
Yes.
And so the victim, more often than not, the whole idea behind, what the predator's trying to do is make the victim sound crazy, right? The predator's
Yeah,
very
absolutely.
calm, cool, collected on the stand,
That's right.
and the
The
victim is the
victim's
hysterical.
emotional, dramatic, over the top,
Yes.
reactionary. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unstable.
Right. Hysterical
Yeah.
and more and the judge hears this and the judge is like, "Well, she obviously or he obviously can't handle the kids." And so then the children become the centerpiece and they become the pawns. And so
Right.
what I try to do is really not only educate the victims, opposing counsel, the judge, but say, look, we have to reframe this narrative. We are in protection mode. The whole objective is to protect the kids, not to re-damage them, not to make them reintegrate them back into the life of the abuser predator who frankly is using them as pawns.
Right.
So, and I think it's a whole education process, but it's also a strategy. And I go into that at length in my book. I have roadmaps, I have scripts, I have, if so and so says this, what's the reaction? What do you do? Because, when I was going through it, I didn't even know what I was experiencing. And
Mhm.
I didn't know there were red flags. I didn't know there were I mean, I knew there were psychopaths because I was obviously representing some of them, but
You're right.
I had no idea because when you're in that world, it's almost too close to see. So,
Yes.
and that's the crazy part of it, if you will. And so I really do identify and understand what a lot of my clients are experiencing when they come to me. And so I don't need to be educated in that regard because I already get it. So then I say to them, well, what's going to happen if you get a custody evaluator involved? Who are these custody evaluators? I mean, let's vet them. Let's figure out what's the objective, because the objective of a custody evaluator is to reunite the parents,
Right. Right.
the children to the parents, to co-parent. And, that's a great ideal if the playing field is level, but it's not when you're dealing with a psychopath.
And you mentioned in that the term does get bandied around quite a bit right now. So it's everyone's like, oh, so and so's a narcissist, and oh, so and so's a sociopath, a psychopath. Blah. All these are thrown about quite a bit. What do you think differentiates just a contentious, maybe one party is hurt or pissed off, but they're not psychopaths? Like, how can you tell if the perceived victim that comes to you says so and so is a psychopath? How do you even know whether it's them projecting that or if it's real? Or is this just there's no divorce that's garden variety, but is this just a garden variety hurt feelings, disappointment, excitement on one part, uh, trying to keep it together? How do you know the difference between the pain of a breakup versus one of these parties is a psychopath?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. And there's definitely a way to tell. And so what I like to do is I get rid of the labels, and I'm looking for patterns of behavior, and I'm looking for documentation. And so I will oftentimes say to my client, "Look, we have to figure out the strategy, the lay of the land here. What do you think is the Achilles heel of your soon to be ex? Usually it's money, sometimes it's children, sometimes it's both. If the person's really, really worried about their reputation, to me, that sort of signals, okay, maybe, narcissistic. So
Hmm.
how about we, go after things that might humiliate them? What are some
Hmm.
behaviors that they really don't want out in the public? So I get the client to start to catalog, and they have to be very specific. And so I say, look, if your objective is he's abusing substances while he's with the children. I say, how do we prove that? Because we need to bring evidence into the court. So, what is that evidence? It's text messages, it's ring camera evidence, it's social media, it's anything that you can document. And I tell my clients right away, get off the phone. Do not have a conversation with your soon to be ex on a telephone, because I guarantee you they're going to want to talk, because you can't record it, or not decently. People are not in the mode of like,
Right.
let's record our telephone conversation,
Right.
So I tell them, you want to be strategic. You want to email things. And so I get them in the habit of saying, okay, if you happen to have a conversation, if you happen to witness something, then I'll say to them, for example, follow it up in an email that day.
Yes.
Say, hey, I wasn't particularly thrilled at what happened at, little Johnny's football game.
Right. Right.
I mean, the fact that you did XYZ, okay?
Yes.
So you're stating it very specifically, and you're developing a pattern of behavior. So, the simple answer to the question, am I married to a narcissist, sociopath, or psychopath, okay, is all right. Every psychopath is a narcissist. Every sociopath is a narcissist. Not every narcissist is a sociopath or psychopath. Okay, that's a very
Okay.
simplistic version of it. And the book goes into this because it's very nuanced. It's very complicated because they can have comorbidities. They can have other, issues going on. One can be a borderline and a psychopath. So, we don't want to become like, pseudo
We have a whole
psychologists.
menu.
Yeah, and it really is very complicated. And I think what happens is people start to come up with these buzzwords, and then the judge's eyes are going to roll back, or,
That's right.
you start to see the glaze happening like, all right, the credibility is shot. But if you come with evidence, you come with documentation. And I, this is one of my favorites in trial is I come with basically 10 solid examples. So maybe one's a text message, one's an email, one's a video, you know, one's a ring camera recording, but they're all showing the same behavior. Maybe I'm trying to show that the guy is reckless, or the guy's an alcoholic. So I've got a ring camera showing crates of beer outside on the stoop,
Right. Right.
something like that, where you're identifying what's the pattern of behavior that is going to really mess this guy up. And then I always emphasize to the client, judge is only interested in one thing, and that's the best interests of the children.
The children. Yep.
the children, right? I mean, the rest of this, you guys are fighting over money, you're fighting over property. It's not, doesn't have the urgency that unfortunately the client thinks it does. The
Right.
urgency,
Right.
right? I mean, the urgency is the children. And so I try to manage that a little bit with my clients and say, look, let's focus on the thing that's going to matter the most to you. And then I hear this a lot where a client will say, all I care about is the children. I don't care about, the money. He can have the house. And they're willing to give away the farm.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, wait a second. You have to be willing to fight for something. There's just a way to fight for it. And you definitely don't want to be poverty stricken because that's the other MO of a
No.
lot of these guys. These guys are
Yep.
financial abusers. And, so you don't want to give anything. You don't want to give this guy an inch because,
Right.
you know,
We'll take a mile.
yeah. Yeah. So there's
Yeah.
definitely strategies to all of it.
How often does it occur where two psychopaths find each other? Does that happen very often? Where there's like a War of the Roses kind of,
It can. And I have had a case in my experience where that's happened. It can. They do and can attract each other. But more often than not, the MO of a psychopath is they
Right.
enjoy the game. They enjoy
That,
the
right.
manipulation. That's what they fuel off of. You know, the narcissist fuels off of your reaction. And so
Right.
if they're not getting that narcissistic supply, they're going to move on, right? So I think it's unlikely that you're going to have two psychopaths wanting to divorce each other, but it can, it kind of, I mean, I honestly had it happen once, which is kind of crazy. There's the gamesmanship that went on. It wasn't a bit
Next level.
insane. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
next level. But I mean, more often than not, you've got the vulnerable victim, the predator who's preying on the vulnerabilities and, has love bombed them to death, keeps, exiting, re-entering, exiting, re-entering. So you've got the sort of whiplash effect.
Right.
And that's part of the trauma that the client experiences when they come in. They're like, well, I'm not really sure that I'm ready yet. Or I've had
Right.
people say, I really need a catalyst. Like I need a reason. Like I haven't quite caught him, cheating. And I'm waiting for that one thing, So I tell people, the most difficult decision anybody's ever going to have to make in this is the decision to divorce,
Right.
to decide to go and file that paperwork. I mean, it's like taking a 1,000-pound boulder and pushing it to court and like throwing it off and saying, all right, I've now filed the papers.
Right. Right.
It's
That is
very
big.
tough. It's
Right.
very big, very
And
tough.
as all of us know, I'm assuming everyone even listening knows, that also is the beginning of the most dangerous time.
Yes.
Usually, that's when the most dangerous time. Where, as you mentioned, things may go from emotional, verbal, mental to physical and or life-threatening.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a progression of it because as soon as that, psychopath knows you're actually going to do something, right? Then they're going for the jugular. So
Yes.
it's definitely that is the scary time. And that's why I think it's really important for people that are contemplating divorce to get information before they do it, because there is a way to do it safely. It has to be strategic and it really can't be this like impulsive thing. And 99% of the time it's never impulsive because
Right.
I'm talking to clients for several months before they actually decide to take action because they know intuitively
Yeah.
that, it's like they're walking on eggshells already with their partner.
Right.
And so they really don't know and they worry and it's a legitimate worry. They worry about how they're going to support themselves because they
That's
know
right.
the minute they file, their bank accounts are going to shut down. They're going to have no money. I mean, I've seen it all. And
Right.
so it definitely does reach sort of an escalation, a breaking point. And, and I should say, it's definitely not just women. I've had, both sides, men and women. They
Right.
can experience it both. And it just manifests a little bit differently. But the people going through it, they are experiencing trauma. They've lived this long in such a state of hypervigilance that it's almost foreign to them when I tell them they have to learn how to change the paradigm. It's a
Right.
paradigm shift, I mean, it's because once they do that, the gig is up.
Mhm.
Once they stop reacting to
That's
that,
right.
several page email that they're going to get where the
Right.
the main point of the conversation is buried somewhere on page 2.
Mhm.
As soon as they find that power, and they do, I mean, I've seen that transformation. It's really gratifying to see because then I know they're never going to get in that mistake again. So I always tell people the biggest thing that you can do to a narcissist is be indifferent.
Yes.
So,
I can attest to that firsthand, unfortunately. Yeah.
yeah, very hard
When
to do.
when I started rebuking any attempt at any kind of fight and I just had zero response to bait, because they'll try to bait you.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. And then he turned it up to really dramatic levels
Yeah.
because they just can't stand if they don't get the response they expect.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't know what to do with it. I
Right.
mean, and it can do, several different things. One, it can make them amp up their behavior, right? Which can be frightening, or it can go dark, which can be frightening too.
Mhm.
So it's just being educated about those, being prepared for those, and figuring out what your strategy is going to be. Like, I mean,
Right.
everybody has their line in the sand. What are they not going
Right.
to cross? And I once had a client, and this is kind of fascinating, but I asked a client, I said, what is your threshold? They were waiting to divorce this person. And I said, what is that threshold, that line in the sand that would absolutely make you, this is it, I'm walking? And that person said to me, betrayal, which is fascinating because that is, in fact, what happened during the entire marriage.
The entire thing, correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's all betrayal. But it's a process. And I think that, once you decide that you're not going to take it anymore, you've hit rock bottom, this is it. Because you're in survival mode, and it's sort of like you're either going to die with this because it's not
Right.
going to get better. It's going to get worse before it ever gets better, or you're going to make a decision to get out
Right.
because the life after has got to be better than what you're experiencing now.
Yes. Yes, it
So,
absolutely is.
yeah.
When you're approached, because I'm sure with your law firm, you have inquiries coming in all the time. For your own self as an attorney, a leader, a business owner, if you find yourself in that initial interview or whatever, consultation, I guess that's probably what you call it. If you suspect that the person in front of you is actually the psychopath, does that impact your decision on clients you would like to work with or not work with?
Yeah,
Could you
100%.
talk about that a little bit?
That's a very good question because, they are master manipulators. And for every client I have, that the ex is also consulting with an attorney.
Correct.
And so I have had a couple instances because I'm so aware of it and so attuned to it, I can sort of spot what I call the language because there is a language and there are mannerisms. There's a language. And a lot of it is, zero accountability,
Mhm.
right? Zero accountability. When I hear somebody saying to me, telling me their story, and they're starting to say it as if, so and so is just I don't know, this is exaggeration. It's such a monster.
Mhm.
They've done blah, blah, blah to me. And I don't ever hear the person I'm talking to ever take any type of deprecating stance or accountability. It's all blame, blame, blame. That to me is a red flag. And, so that's one thing. The second thing is, am I hearing any empathy? Am I hearing
Mhm.
any compassion? Now, they are master manipulators. So sometimes it's hard to tell in one conversation, but those are sort of the cues that I'm looking for when I'm having a conversation. And I will tell you that there have been instances where, I'm representing somebody and there's something that happens like, week 2
Mhm.
where I'm like, interesting. Okay,
Right.
that's information. And so, so I have gotten off cases where
Okay.
I
I
start
was
to get it
curious.
because yeah, there's no way that I'm going to represent somebody that I've wholeheartedly dedicated a lot of my career to rescuing other people from.
From, right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in law, you're able to do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, in private practice, yes.
Yes. Okay. So that's interesting. That's in your practice, is that something where you would have another person represent them, or you just stop and they find new representation?
I would just stop
Hmm.
because, I know what they are and I know what they've done and I know the abuse that's going to continue. And
Right.
in a lot of scenarios, some of these guys will represent themselves,
Yes.
which, is also challenging. If I'm representing a client and all of a sudden I'm having to communicate with their psychopathic ex, So there's a
Right.
lot of like,
Right. Oh my
you know,
goodness.
right?
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
very, very complicated and very challenging, and that's why I'm always I keep my practice small for a reason,
Hmm.
because these are very high emotional volume, where
Yes.
I really understand. I understand the fear, anxiety that comes with it, this sense of like, it's a kind of PTSD that a lot of clients will experience. And so, you have to be available to answer their questions, to file the
Right.
motions, because you're going to get
Address
bombarded.
the emergency situations because those are
Yes.
coming. Yeah.
Yes, and manage the expectations, and the thing that, that I know going into this is you're gonna get bombarded with paper. A lot of these cases don't settle. They're high litigation. They, file motion after motion with the wrong facts in it.
Hmm.
Um,
And you have no
and
choice, but you have to address. And yeah.
yes, you
Yep.
have to respond, and so it's because if you don't respond and correct the mistake, that becomes the evidence, so to speak.
That's
And
right.
so it's very high volume. And so I have to, I'm fortunate in that I'm in a position where I can really sort of pick and choose which clients I want to work with. And, I know when I take them on that I'm taking them on for the duration. Like there's these are not quick one and done cases. A lot of
No.
times, even if I help them get divorced, there's going to be post decree
Hmm.
petitions, enforcement actions because they don't follow rules. I mean, it's a very long relationship. And so I definitely want my clients to feel that they can vet me, they can make sure that they trust me because, they're in
And
this
you're
thing
in
where
it
they
for the
have
long haul.
yes, you're in
Yeah.
it for the long haul. You can't like just, it's not like any other case really where you're just like, okay, they're a client, I've got an issue that I'm trying to resolve, the issue's done, and then I move to withdraw. There are lots of cases where I don't move to withdraw right after the consent decree or the judgment has finalized because I know they're coming back. I know
Right.
there's going to
Right.
be other issues. So yeah, so it's a very long process, but I mean, I love my clients. I feel like I have these, very long-term, relationships with them. A lot of them have trusted me with some of the most challenging, frightening times of their lives.
Hmm.
And, it's very gratifying to be able to do this work and to bring them over that threshold, And so there are many times where I'll check in with them and say, hey, how's it going 6 months later? Like,
Right.
I
Right.
mean, so it's just a really gratifying area of law.
I think that's it's fantastic. And I love hearing as a professional, you have set boundaries for yourself and you've created a business where it's successful enough that you can make those choices and hold to the boundaries you've set for yourself as an attorney with the clients that you want to take on and represent and the ones that you don't.
Yeah, and I really do think that's so important because it staves off burnout.
Yes.
It enables me to do a very conscientious job for the
Hmm.
clients and to really have conversation with them because a lot of times, I mean, this is what I've heard from some clients that come from other lawyers that then hire me is that they're not being heard. And that's like the number one thing in these relationships that they don't have a voice or they feel like they don't have a voice. So anytime I'm going to do something, either strategically, I'm very careful to have a conversation to explain it, to say, here's the pros and cons. This is what's going to happen if you do XYZ. So, trust that I know what I'm talking about. If you do this, this result's going to happen. So it's very gratifying to do that. I mean, I have a practice where if sometimes, and sometimes this is the case, and I'm very aware of this, where they've been financially abused and they don't
Right.
feel like they have resources, to retain counsel. But that's where I'll step in as a consultant, where they're navigating through it, but they just need help figuring out like, okay, how am I going to respond to their discovery request? How do I respond to
Right.
this? And so I can help them almost from behind the scenes saying, here's what I recommend, they can't quite have me on board for the long haul because these are very costly cases, unfortunately,
Yes.
because of all that, correction that you have to do, the course correction.
Yeah.
And part of it, I mean, is really educating the court too, because as I said, we don't have language in our legislation now to deal with psychological abuse. We don't. The closest that we have is stalking, and
Right.
that's really recent. And oftentimes those stalking cases came about because they culminated in physical abuse.
Right.
So it's like proving a negative. I mean, the
Correct.
the
Correct.
the poor victim's like, how do I prove that someone's watching me? Well, I mean, like they're not obvious about it. Only the victim
Right.
knows. I mean, that's what's the clandestine nature of a lot of this stuff. And it's hard. And unfortunately, the emotional abuse, the psychological abuse is sometimes far worse than the physical abuse
Yeah. It's
and long
awful.
lasting. Yeah.
Right. Well, I think your book sounds intriguing. Another thing, Kerrie, is on the JivagoLaw.com website, right? That's your website.
Yes. Yes.
You have something called a predator quiz. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Like when, who's that for? What timing should they use to go take that quiz? Could you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, so I have if you go to my website, shivagolaw.com, there's a pop-up that comes up. And so I actually devised a master class, which is a 5-part module class. And that's a sort of another step if people can't quite afford the full blown, let's hire, Kerrie Droban, then let's
Hmm.
see what I'm dealing with. And so I kind of lay it out for clients, like here's what this looks like. The predator quiz is a 5-minute, very simple, you're not obligated to, join a newsletter or anything like that.
Right.
It's basically to sort of test your own knowledge of, am I married to a psychopath? Am I married to a dangerous person? And more often than not, people that are going to take that quiz already feel that they are, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so but when I started out, like I said, I didn't know that there were actual signs. Like I didn't know what that was. I didn't even know what love bombing was. I had no idea. I just thought, wow, this person really is so into me. This is
Yeah.
amazing, But so I think, I mean, the quiz, it's like 5 questions. Can you spot a predator? And you get the answers immediately. It's emailed to you. And it's just sort of a way for you to kind of do a self check. Maybe I need to learn a little more. Maybe I am in a dangerous relationship. Maybe I need to get divorced. And so it's an interesting tool. It's one of many tools on my website, but that's a
Well,
free
I
one.
was actually curious. Would that be something that someone who is engaged or considering getting engaged, should they also take the predator quiz?
Well, that's a great question. Yes, I believe they should. In fact, I have a whole chapter in my book on dating and the dark web, I call it, because so many of my clients and, your listeners are out there on dating apps, on the web. And what are those profiles? What are the tells in the profiles? And there are tells. And I actually, take one as a sample and I show readers, hey, if the profile looks like this, watch out. And so,
Run away.
yes, run and don't let the door hit you on the ass on the way out.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, that's a predator dream. They can be anyone you want them to be on that
Right.
website.
I agree with you, Kerrie. I mean, I'm not an expert. Don't have the experience you do in law other than hiring attorneys. I've probably done that more often than you, I'm going to guess. But you're right. I think that the online dating world is a fishing pond for the predators.
Yeah. It's the dirty Johns out there. And it's sad. I mean, there are, I don't want to condemn everybody that's out there, looking for their next love, but it's certainly um, I mean, it's definitely something to be careful of because, that is how they find their prey, and I think probably the most vulnerable thing that a potential victim could say to their date is, I've just been through such a horrible relationship and I just need to be with somebody that I can trust. Right? Right? You've heard that.
So actually, you know how sometimes you can get clarity in an area from someone who deals with the end result. So you're dealing with the end result of these relationships that have gone pear-shaped. If somebody is dating or they are still hoping post-divorce or even straight out of the gate, what do you recommend in terms of where you may find someone that would truly have a greater potential to fulfill what you're looking for?
I think the important thing is to always vet the person that you're with. Don't be so quick to put them on a pedestal,
Okay.
or think that, they're the be all end all, they're perfect. Because remember, a psychopath is mirroring you. They want to be who you need. So if you need someone to trust, they're going to be that person, you know? And so you want to question things. If they tell you they've been employed as a Navy SEAL, a CIA operative, or they've been out of work for 9 months, those are the kind of things you want to check out. You know, I mean, we're in the age of internet sleuthing. It's very easy to verify. And so, I would just say be discerning. See if they have friends, right? I mean, check out their friends. Most psychopaths have interesting acquaintances,
And very few
very few
long friends.
friends. And they've oftentimes have switched jobs multiple times. So they'll either say, they didn't get along with the boss, or, right? I know you're smiling because these are classic things,
They are
right?
classic. Yes, they are.
And be careful of titles. If somebody says, or somebody is a doctor, for instance, a lot of people are so quick to forgive a lot of, like, maybe inconsistencies or hardships that the person thing. So, just because the fact that they're a doctor does not mean that they get a free pass in the psychopath world,
That's right.
you know? So I think that's something to be conscientious of. I mean, if they are a doctor, where did they go to medical school? Do they have a number of gaps in their employment? Look for stories that they might tell you that kind of make them seem like they want to be pitied, or
Yes.
they want to be
They lost their
seen.
privileges at a hospital or 3, but they were just
Right.
standing up for someone.
Exactly. Yeah.
Maybe not. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, just look for question beyond
Question
the
beyond.
initial
Yeah.
story delivered
Yeah,
from the person.
exactly. Yeah, just be that questioning, discerning person that you are, and don't be so eager to jump into a relationship. The other really, really big flag is moving too quickly.
Yes.
You met them last week. Now they want to move in with you,
Yeah.
right?
Or they want you to move in with them. Like either direction,
Either
I
way.
think that's a red flag.
Yes. Yeah. Or they suddenly want to isolate you. You're the only way, like, suddenly you can't hang out with your girlfriend. I mean, these are all red flags. They're all very highlighted in my book. And a guide, and it sort of covers the gamut of every, kind of potential psychopath.
So on the whole, I remember back when I was young, like in the 80s, I think, there were a bunch of stats thrown around in the news of like 50% of marriages fail. And, like there was a lot of brouhaha about high divorce rate. anything changing in that world? I don't follow news by choice, so I don't know. Maybe there's been news stories about it. But in your experience, has there been any change of significance in divorce rates, at least in America?
Sadly, no. It's actually a higher statistic. And I think it's like 75%. And I think the real key to that is, one, being careful who you marry to begin with. We have a lot of young marriages where it's sort of, and I get upset with the media for this because I feel like a lot of, and I'll say this, many women get sold a bill of goods. You've got Bride magazine,
Yep.
you've got the so-called pressure of getting married, having children, and then somehow, somewhere along the way, somebody says, "Well, what are you going to do when you have children?" Right? And then the children somehow, take over your career aspirations. Somehow you can't do both. And so, I think that there's a lot of narratives going around that people just buy into. And I think it's really important to stay true. I mean, it sounds very cliche, but stay true to who you are. I had two children, have two children. I have two careers and I worked very hard to be where I'm at. And I would say I'm a great mother, and I think there are ways you can change that narrative and be a role model to your family. And I think it's just my own personal opinion why a lot of marriages fail, finances. And women, they forget the reason that their husband or they were attracted to each other in the first place, right? Because they're interesting, engaging people. I think it's important to continue to honor that. I don't believe that marriage and family should be sacrifices.
Right.
I think it should be enhancements.
Enhancements.
So, yes, long answer to your short question.
But I agree with you. And I run into that in the coaching that I do with professionals in real estate and business owners. Shut out the noise of anyone else and stay true to what you truly desire, whether that is staying home, creating a single income family. Make sure you protect everyone in
Yeah.
that event, or if you want to work. And there's even some, I believe, I have not checked the stats, but I know anecdotally, there's even more men who are also saying, I'm going to stay home for 6 years if they're, I've heard of that. I
Right.
have close friends where their grown son has made that choice with a degree and a career, but the wife's career was earning more money and going more places. So made that
Yeah.
choice for who knows how long it'll be, but it is for right now. So they did that because they made their own decision for their own selves and they stayed true to what they felt was
Yeah.
possible for them. So allow yourself that freedom.
Yeah.
There's not a panel of Olympic judges off on the side that'll be like 7.3, 10. There's no one that can
Right.
make that decision as you're expanding your family.
Yeah. It's definitely a personal choice, staying true to who you are, becoming someone that your partner wants you to be. I think that's the key.
So if someone says to you, well, with your practice and your law and your experience, what do you think of marriage? Should I ever get married? Like, and you have to answer. What's your answer?
I still believe in marriage and I believe in love. And I think when it works, it's incredible.
Right.
It's amazing to have a true equal partner. So I always tell people that in a relationship, there are three people. There's you, there's your partner, and then there's the capital R for a relationship,
Right.
right? And so I think where this gets noisy, if you will, is when people say, well, we're just going to become one. We're like a unit. And, in order to maintain your identity, to be an interesting, engaging person, you have to be autonomous, making decisions for that capital R, so that you can still be separate people in a wonderful union. And I'm married now and my relationship is amazing,
Right.
but
But each of you as individuals are respecting and feeding the capital R,
yes,
I'm assuming.
yes, exactly. It's true
Each taking
partnership.
responsibility to make sure that the capital R is healthy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That the interests of the capital R are meant to, uplift
Right.
the two
And
individuals.
enhance.
Yes.
So just on one other bit of curiosity that I have. So we talked about psychopaths, which unfortunately I can relate to those relationships. What if you have someone that comes to you and it's one of the we've drifted apart, we still love each other, but we're not in love? What's your advice or questions that you would ask someone who finds themselves in that situation?
I guess the first thing I would ask is, do they still have young children? Because there are definitely ways to repair marriages that have gone stale. And then I would ask questions like, do you guys spend time together? Have you grown together in an interest? Do you share a common interest? And, and if they don't, then I would recommend that they take up something, whether
But
it's,
Kerrie, our shared interest is the children.
well, then I would say you need to find another way to connect. So, do you have a date night? Do you have mutual friends? Can you get a subscription to a theater?
Right. Right.
Do you enjoy playing golf? There are ways where you have to work at it,
Right.
and it can't just be the children.
I know, yeah. But are you
Because
s I feel like that's happening more and more often now. I could be wrong. It's
no,
just
it is. It is. And I think it's fatigue, and I've been there where the children are very scheduled, they're in all their sports activities or their music activities, and you're running in different directions all the time. You're, working and then going to these scheduled things. So, part of it is finance and part of it's time,
right,
and you're just exhausted, which is again a reason I say if you could just carve out, even if it's once a month, an evening together
right,
where, either you get a sitter or you have somebody else take Johnny to the soccer game
right.
and you guys go out to dinner or you go for a walk, you go for a hike. It's a way to reconnect. And it just takes planning. It's like scheduling a lunch date and not breaking it.
So the good thing that I hear is you're willing to have that conversation. If someone comes to you and says, "I wanna get divorced, nothing's really that bad, we just have drifted apart," you're willing to have the engaging conversation with them to explore other options and not just say, "Great, another client, here, sign."
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
100%. In fact, a lot of times I've had clients, well, they'll put a pause either on the divorce, and I'll say, maybe reconciliation, you know, maybe go to a marriage boot camp, you know, or these are obviously not the relationships where there's, toxicity going on.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, it's not. So this is the counter to the psychopath
Yeah,
conversation that we were
right.
having.
Yeah. And I've definitely had prospective clients that I've encouraged to reconcile, to maybe just take, give themselves 3, 4 months and see if some of these things that they implement are going to rekindle that,
Right,
because they have a history together. There was, obviously something that drew them together,
right.
and then that's barring some kind of tragedy that they can't get back from.
Correct. Yeah. No, I get what you mean. So, Kerrie, we've already talked about you're an attorney with your own law practice, specializing in family law, Zhivago law. You are an author with 10 books out and a journalist, but I believe you also wear another hat. I believe you have a true crime podcast.
I do.
Can you tell me more about that? I love true crime. So, yes, tell
Yeah.
us about your podcast.
So it's called Crime Stands Still. And I go into it's called Crime Stands Still Deep Cuts because I like to explore some of the more notorious criminals, including Ted Bundy. So I've done a number of episodes on, a lot of like the really grisly, sick serial killers, but mostly just exploring their pathology, what we can learn from them still, and, how they still impact the way that we either investigate crimes or deal with victims of crimes. And so I've had a lot of fun with it. They're quick, they're like 15, 20 minute segments. And yeah, I've had a lot of fun.
Well, I have a couple of questions, if you don't mind. With the advent and the progression of forensic science, DNA, cameras everywhere. I don't remember the number, but there's a statistic where the average American that leaves their home every day, you're on camera. I think it's over 116 times a day.
Yeah.
I've got to look that number up again. I'll correct it and put it in the show notes. But has there been any impact on the rate of, say, serial killers, or has that advancement led to any decrease in horrific crimes or serial killers?
Well, I don't know that it's leading to a decrease, but it is solving some cold cases. Like the Colonial Parkway murders just got solved. I mean, like this month.
Wow.
So that was a really horrific serial killer, murdered 8 couples along the Colonial Parkway,
Wow.
and so a lot of these killers got away with things because, I mean, first of all, there wasn't DNA and there wasn't shared information
Right.
across jurisdictions.
Right.
So that's changing. But, I think the thing about serial killers that's, still so mind blowing is how manipulative a lot of them are and the victims that they choose. A lot of them are runaways. A lot of them are people that won't be missed.
Right.
So I don't know. It's an interesting question. And I'd have to actually research that more to see if it's had that kind of impact.
I know that in some of the true crime YouTube channels that I watch, um, there's a theory that some of the people that have been caught and have been convicted, they were showing all the signs that profiles would say they were on their way to being a serial killer, but they were caught due to some of those advancements or great work by the police early in their career with starting what they may have started.
Yeah.
Which, if anyone out there is listening and like, what is she talking about? Like, how do you know? Well, I think you would know the difference and could probably say it better than I do. There are people that murder someone in close proximity for a reason, or a crime of passion. Not that it's any less horrible, but it's not that they had the whole psyche and the whole serial killer mind. Am I
Right.
correct or am I off?
No, you are correct.
Okay. So
Yeah.
it
And
is fascinating.
it is fascinating. And to your point, I mean, this is something I may cover in one of my episodes, but There has been some speculation that Brian Kohlberger, had he not been caught,
Correct.
was on his way to being a serial
I
killer.
actually heard that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah, so it's amazing. And it's amazing to me probably because I have the algorithms on alert, that I like true crime. When those cold cases do get solved and it's either from, someone submitted their DNA to Ancestry and then we
Yeah.
were able to figure out, this. And they get
Yeah.
these people from the 80s and the 90s and they're still alive. So those tend to come across my YouTube feed. I can't wait to listen to your podcast and binge watch some of the playlists.
Thank you.
And really looking forward to your book. So, Kerrie, you said this is your 10th book, right? The
Yes.
Surviving the Psychopath in Court, in Life, and in Love. And I am burning up to know what's next on the horizon. What are you working on now?
I'm actually working on a book that features Ted Bundy, but not so much his methods and madness. But I'm very curious about the women that fell in love with him.
Yes.
It really just sort of dovetails with what I do in my practice. What is it about the women? How did he manipulate them? And I'm not just talking about his girlfriends and wives, that stayed with him even after learning about his horrific murders. But he also had groupies, so I'm very interested in that subject.
I am also very interested in that subject, and I would love for you to let me know when that book comes out. It's very
Will
funny.
do.
Just this past weekend, I was at a convention in Georgia, and as we were all leaving to go back to our places around the country, one of my friends was going on a cruise. She decided to tack a cruise on after the convention. And she was texting me about someone she had met at the hotel and all of this. And I asked several questions. And I said, well, he doesn't sound very Bundy-esque. And used that phrase. And she goes, well, neither did Ted Bundy. Right. So it made
Wow.
her sort of pause for a minute. And I was like, yeah, let's
Yeah, he's
ratchet
still
that back.
fascinating.
Right. So it's very funny that you're mentioning that you're doing that book. And I had just used that phrase just a couple days ago. That is fascinating. And it not only does that did that happen with Ted Bundy, it happens a lot. The
Yes.
family annihilator in Colorado, he's got
Yeah.
groupies. I don't even like to say their names because I don't like to give them any.
Yeah.
The brothers, I'm dumbstruck, gobsmacked by the groupie effect post conviction.
Yes.
And then sometimes they get married and stuff. And I'm like,
yes. It's
how am I still
really
single? What?
it's
But the
fascinating.
convict that, has
I
quite
know.
a track record has groupies and someone that wants to come marry them. Okay.
Yeah.
And obviously I'm being tongue in cheek. I'm not saying
Yeah.
that seriously, but it is fascinating. So when
Yeah.
that book comes out, I really want you to let me know. And I
I
want to
will.
extend an invitation now that I'd like to invite you back to be a guest again after that book comes out.
Thank you. I would love that.
It sounds fascinating.
Thank you. Well,
So
this
I
has been
do. I
great.
want to thank you, Kerrie, for being our guest. I have a question about Zhivago. So I know Dr. Zhivago is not real, but how often you must get asked about that? Are you related? All the time. Where does the name come from? What's the history behind the name?
Yeah, so that's a good question. When I got divorced, about 7 years ago now,
Mm-hmm.
I had an opportunity to choose my name. And I didn't feel like I wanted to, you know, re I don't know, rebirth, if that's a word, maiden name.
Right.
So it'd been too long. I didn't want to necessarily keep the last name of my first ex. So I made up a name, and Zhivago actually means life after. Yeah. So that's my last name.
Married name from my second marriage, and the great man that was the father of my sons. And they were young enough where I just kept it
Yeah.
because then with school and everything, it was
Yeah.
just easier and it flows well, Bridget Stewart. So I kept
Yeah.
that. But that's really cool. So
Yeah.
I
Thank
love
you.
that, and that meaningful, not just with what you do in your career, but what you have been through yourself.
Yeah.
That is really beautiful. So thank you for sharing that with everyone. Now,
Thank
if you
you.
happen to be listening to this episode of The Inner Estate, I want to invite you back as well. Please come back and listen to the next episode and stay posted, follow, so you can hear when Kerrie Droban Zhivago will be a guest again after The Many Lovers of Ted Bundy. I don't know what the title will be yet, but the book that you're writing on that really intriguing dynamic of the people that fall in love with and fell in love with Ted Bundy. So thank
Thank
you.
you.
And I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you. I did too. It was a pleasure.